It's no secret that there's been a huge surge in online services requiring users to submit their photo IDs due to regulatory pressure, and looking back at the history of things, the slippery slope of ID verification is like the Kilimanjaro water slide because of how quickly we've gone down it. First, the ID checks were forced on adult websites, and that's the kind of thing that most people would support. The old think of the children narrative works really well to gain support for regulating adult video sites because nobody in their right mind would want their children viewing that kind of content, and unfortunately so many parents expect the government to intervene in child rearing that it's really easy for the regulators to get a majority of voters to support those measures. Then the government came for Discord. And again, if you know about the epidemic of online predators grooming children through that platform specifically, you might actually support the government requiring ID checks there as well. But now we've gone so far down the slope that different states are starting to require distributors of operating systems to start implementing age checks for users that are installing them. California has already passed a bill that forces this requirement starting in January 1st, 2027, and the state of Colorado has a similar bill that's being voted on in their General Assembly right now. And that's where this stops being a debate about a couple of sketchy websites out there and it starts becoming a debate about the computer itself. Because California's AB 1043 and Colorado's SB 26-051, it doesn't just target one app or one platform, it requires an operating system provider to present an accessible interface during account setup that asks for the user's birth date, age, or both, specifically so that the OS can generate an age signal for apps that the user wants to install on it. So your operating system is no longer just the thing that boots up your computer, loads your files, then gets out of your way so that you can get to your work or play. The state wants it to become a kind of compliance layer that sits underneath every app on the device, sorting human beings into brackets like 13, 13 to 15, 16 to 17, or 18 and older, and exposing that bracket through a real-time API to whatever developer app you install. And in case you're thinking that you could just go run out and buy some more RAM at inflated prices and install an operating system on a future-proofed computer in order to get grandfathered into this, that's not going to be good enough because the law reaches back to apply itself to older installations like some kind of fascist time traveler. So even if you're running an older operating system, before this law goes into effect, the state will compel the developers of those operating systems to bolt on the age compliance after the fact. So operating systems are going to need to have some kind of environment variable that gets set during installation, and I guess also increment over time to display to applications how old you are, which poses a serious risk for the developers of the applications you use, because they're the ones that actually have to take that variable from your operating system, analyze it, and then change the app's behavior or possibly block access to the app altogether, depending on what that variable is set to. So in other words, the government is going to mark you with an age bracket, and that mark is supposed to follow you everywhere across cyberspace into every application you install. And of course, laws don't mean much without any consequences. So the fines for not complying can be up to $2,500 per affected child, and an international violation could cost up to $7,500 per affected child, enforced by the Attorney General in a civil action. Now, if we dig a little bit deeper, it becomes clear how these laws could cripple the use of free and open source operating systems. So most operating systems are made either by Google in the case of Android or Chrome OS, Apple in the case of Mac OS and iOS, or Microsoft in the case of Windows. These companies could very easily add this age bracket step into the setup of their operating systems, and even if they don't for some reason, the fines for non-compliance would be negligible to those multi-trillion-dollar companies. We've already seen what they do with the regulations that Europe imposes on them. You know, the EU imposes billions of dollars worth of fines on these companies each year because it's literally more profitable for them to just pay those fines and continue spying on people to collect data for their ads network. But the desktop and mobile Linux world is a completely different situation. The developers of those operating systems, they don't spy on their users. They don't have a massive ads network that generates billions of dollars in revenue for them each year. They don't make any money off of their operating systems other than maybe donations, and in some cases they might offer a premium tech support package, but that's generally it. So the real question is, how would this law affect Linux, and more specifically, the ready-made, just works Linux distros like Ubuntu and CatchyOS that people are switching to en masse because of the privacy violations that big tech is imposing on their users? Well, Ubuntu actually posted a newsletter about this law, and they brought up some of the things that weren't made very clear in the law, like whether it applies to just desktops or servers, since Ubuntu is also a very popular server OS. Does the law apply to virtual machines? Does the law even apply to people that are over 18, since California's wording specifically defines the user as a child? So it's obviously much harder to nail down how this would be implemented in the Linux world, but with those just works distros, the setup process of the operating system is pretty much the same as Windows 11 to a lay user. So I guess the maintainers could just throw in the age bracket question during the setup and then set that environment variable, and then it gets checked by all the apps that you install. So those distro maintainers, they in theory just have to do a little bit of work with the setup script. It still sucks because they're doing the work for free, but I don't see any practical way of implementing this feature for the hobbyist distros like Arch or Gentoo. But the way that the law is written, it makes it sound like those distros would also have to comply. Section G of California's bill defines an operating system provider as a person or entity that develops, licenses, or controls the operating system software on a computer, mobile device, or any other general purpose computing device. So, based on that, I would suspect that Gentoo and Arch would fall under the definitions since they control the package managers, Portage and Pacman respectively, and as a result, they do have some control over the software that can be installed on your operating system. Now, of course, the package manager or the official package manager is not the only option for installing software. Arch has the AUR, which the Arch Linux team don't really have full control over since it's a community repo. Same applies to Guru, which is the user repository for Gentoo Linux. And of course, end users have the option of installing packages via app images, Flatpaks, compiling from source without the use of Portage, or just creating their own local package managers for installing pre-compiled packages. So obviously, the more tech literate users are ultimately going to be ungovernable because regardless of what law the boomers that run this country put on paper, they can't actually legislate free and open source software. But the vast majority of people who depend on computers without any real understanding of how they work are going to have to deal with this invasion of privacy on an ongoing basis. And even though right now the law just relies on end users to honestly select the appropriate age bracket, that can easily be expanded into a full-on ID verification, just like what happened to the pornography websites and what's going on with Discord. It might seem like a nothing burger right now, but what you need to remember about the slippery slope is that you tend to gradually slide down it into deeper and deeper levels of tyranny over time so that the people don't notice the increased surveillance right away. If you have the digital literacy to roll your own Linux distro, then there's no way that you can truly be forced into complying with this overreach. But for the people that are using Ubuntu or other easier Linux distros, you might start to find the privacy paradise of the Linux world isn't as nice as it used to be. And today it's just selecting an age bracket, which is still very harmful to online anonymity, but tomorrow it could easily become a face scan and an ID check, just like we've seen with so many other online services. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it to hack the algorithm, and check out my online store, based.win, where you can buy my awesome merch like this based.win t-shirt or accessories for your phone or laptop. 10% store-wide discount when you pay with Monero XMR at checkout. Have a great rest of your day.